It was a project that began as a way to bring together all generations of fans for the franchise's 25th anniversary. However, a series of circumstances would completely redefine the project as the end of an era, and it would take a group of unpaid heroes to take the movie across the finish line. Today, I'll be covering the Turtles Forever movie and its place in TMNT history. The concept of a crossover story between the 1987 and 2003 Turtles was a long-running one. Playmates suggested the idea at some point as an excuse to do something with the original toy line. However, a project like that had more challenges than benefits at the time. Mirage Studios didn't own that version of the franchise, and doing anything with it would require loads of negotiations with Fred Wolf. It wasn't until 2007 that Mirage approved the project, with the idea of releasing it as a movie for the 25th anniversary. The movie could also be split into 3 episodes of the cartoon for easier distribution. Playmates, however, didn't get involved with the project. The film was funded by Mirage and 4Kids, which gave the team more creative freedom than usual. Turtles Forever was directed by Roy Burdine and Lloyd Goldfine, and written by Rob David, Matthew Dreck, and Lloyd Goldfine. Danny Kamanian, Khary Randolph, and Emilio Lopez were in charge of character designs, while Eric Stewart, Darren Dunstan, and John Dixon were in charge of voice direction. The movie was animated by Dongwoo Animation, the same studio behind the 2003 series. The movie poster was a joint effort between Khary Randolph, Emilio Lopez, Keith Conroy, and Adrian Barrios, inspired by the Transformers animated film poster. Like I said before, characters and concepts like Bebop, Rocksteady, or the Technodrome were off limits to Mirage, so special agreements had to be signed with Fred Wolf to include them in the movie. The 1987 music, unfortunately, proved too difficult and expensive for a project of this budget. The music licensor proved uncooperative, so a decision was made to go with sound-alike songs and themes. Production on the film also faced some interesting challenges, some of which stemmed from the upgrade to the medium. Turtles Forever was made in HD and letterboxed, which was a significant upgrade from the regular Back to the Sewer episodes. Lacking access to material from the 1987 cartoon, 4Kids asked the Technodrome users for help obtaining scans of original art from the series. They needed to reconstruct backgrounds that the Korean studio could repaint digitally. Those 1987 scenes would also need to match the show's color grading. For these, they needed to use the original Pantone colors as specified in the cartoon model sheets. As a final touch, they used a sepia overlay in the 1987 universe to give it the same warmth as the original cartoon's aged film stock. The film's production was severely undermanned. The team ended up working unpaid overtime, even after the show was cancelled and 4Kids began shutting down the unit. People behind this project continued working on it because they realized it had an entirely new meaning. They knew about the negotiations with Viacom, and while they didn't know what that would mean for them, the writing was on the wall. There wasn't going to be another season. In other words, this would be the final chapter of the 2003 series, and, as it would turn out, the end of the independent era of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The struggles at 4Kids had begun earlier than the Viacom acquisition. Not only were they losing their anime licenses, but the economy was also going through a noticeable crisis. The team knew delivering the film depended on their willpower. With Roy Burdine laid off, Lloyd and Emilio had to complete the final cut and post-production. Lloyd was laid off during the last week, and his last action with the Turtles was to deliver the film in person at San Diego Comic-Con. The movie was recorded at 4Kids Productions under very tight budget constraints. Because of that, they couldn't afford the guild prices of the original 1987 cast, who would have also needed to cross the country as they were located on the West Coast. This is why the original cast wasn't asked to reprise their roles in the film. The story began with the strange news about the purple dragons fighting 4 turtle-like creatures at the site of a high-tech lab robbery. Curious about the identity of these creatures, the turtles decided to pay Hun a visit. Hun, however, was a little disappointed after realizing that the dragons had captured the wrong turtles. Listening to what these strange-looking ninja turtles had to say, Hun was shocked to hear that the Shredder was back. Of course, these were the 1987 turtles, and they were talking about their version of the Shredder, something Hun couldn't possibly know. The awful surprises came with a silver lining. Hun realized the mutagen's potential and began considering the implications of a mutant army. Plans that would need to wait for a while, as the 2003 turtles broke into the building and helped free their 1987 counterparts. After taking back the mutagen capsules, they defeated Hun and the dragons and escaped from their headquarters. As you can imagine, the 2003 turtles had questions about the similarities between the two sets of brothers. The 1987 turtles explained that during the Technodrome's attack on the city, they went inside it to prevent the Shredder from getting his hands on more mutagen. They managed to get it back, but the foot soldiers attacked them while Donnie was trying to send the Technodrome back to Dimension X using the fortress's dimensional portal. The foot soldiers destroyed the console, which in turn must have transported the Technodrome and its inhabitants to another universe. After hearing their story, Splinter realized that having another Shredder in their universe was too great a risk, and he urged the two sets of turtles to find the Technodrome and get everyone back to their original universe. The turtles effectively found the Technodrome, and a battle ensued. However, seeing his turtles team up with this universe's version of them gave Shredder the idea of teaming up with the 2003 Shredder and Krang. But to their surprise, there was no Krang, only a very threatening Shredder that had been exiled to an icy asteroid. With the Technodrome on the run, the turtles tried to follow its trail from the surface, but they got interrupted by Hun and the Purple Dragons, now with their own mutant dog. Hun tried to get his hands on more mutagen during this fight, but this only led to his accidental mutation into a mutant turtle. Shredder and Krang managed to rescue this world's Shredder from the asteroid, not thinking twice about why this being was so dangerous that he had to be exiled in the first place. This universe's Shredder was actually an Utrum called Shirel, and it quickly became apparent that he was more than they could handle. They tried to put him in suspended animation, but Khary broke into the Technodrome, searching for her adoptive father. She had been keeping an eye on Shirel's whereabouts, and after discovering he was back on Earth, she came to his rescue. After seeing the matter transmitter in the Technodrome, Khary took over the fortress in the name of the Foot. With Shirel in control, the Technodrome ran into Hun, who now looked a little more like classic Slash, and recruited him back as a henchman. With the Technodrome under new management, Shirel started upgrading the fortress, making it invisible to the Turtles' technology. They even upgraded the robotic foot soldiers, making them deadlier and more dangerous. They even synthesized their own version of the mutagen, creating a mutant army that included Tokka and Rahzar. Intrigued by the existence of another universe, Shirel used the technology at his disposal to understand the concept of alternate dimensions. After discovering the secret of the Turtleverse, he realized he was going to need 2 sets of turtles to put an end to the Turtles forever. Since the 2003 Turtles had never faced a technological fortress like the Technodrome, it was up to the 1987 Turtles to find a way to stop it. Unfortunately, their anti-Technodrome technology was still in their universe, so the Donatellos started working on it. Their attempt to cross dimensions would face a last-minute challenge though. Using a technological nose, Hun, Bebop, and Rocksteady invaded the lair. The fight was too destructive for the lair, and just before it collapsed, the Turtles managed to make the portal work. Unfortunately, Splinter was left behind and taken prisoner. The Turtles spent some time in the 1987 universe, gathering what they could, including their vehicles.
What, your clown car's in the shop?
Back in the 2003 universe, the Technodrome was wreaking havoc on the streets, aiming to lure the Turtles inside. The Turtles arrived at the scene with the party wagon and the blimp to relieve the efforts of the military, Casey and April, who were fighting the Klan and the mutants. By then, Shirelle had already taken over the whole operation and ordered Bebop and Rocksteady to restrain their former bosses. With no other choice but to go in, the Turtles ventured into what looked like the final fight.
Go, Green Machine! It's ninja time! Turtle power! Annoying power.
But, as I said, it was all a trap to get two sets of turtles for Shirelle's new centrifugal machine. He explained to them that there were many universes with turtles in them, and as long as the Ninja Turtles existed anywhere in the multiverse, no Shredder could succeed. There would always be the chance that the other turtles would stop his efforts. However, Shirelle discovered that there was a prime dimension from which all other universes branched. Destroying that universe would cause a chain reaction that could destroy the rest. To find that universe, Shirelle was scanning the turtles, breaking them down to discover their source DNA. After he successfully located the Turtle Prime universe, the Technodrome was transported there. The turtles should have died then, but Khary saw the madness in Shirelle's plan and transported them to safety. Whatever Shirelle was doing in the Prime universe was starting to make the 2003 Earth disappear. Unfortunately, they couldn't stop them from there. They'd need to track the exact location to get to the Prime universe. After remembering about the technology stolen by the Purple Dragons, they went to their headquarters to steal it back. Hun tried to stop them, but despite their different styles, the two sets of turtles were fighting as one team by now. Unfortunately, with the universe dying, there was no time for fighting. They convinced Hun to hand over his loot so they could stop Shirelle. Escaping from Erasure was hard, and not even April and Casey made it. When it all seemed lost, the 2003 Donatello drew on the 1987 logic he had learned in this adventure. After beating the uncooperative device one last time, they were transported to the Prime universe. When they arrived in the original black and white universe, they ran into the original turtles. They took some convincing, but after hearing they were trying to find the Shredder, the Source Turtles agreed to work together. They were temporarily interrupted by the original Shredder, who showed up to fight the Source Turtles. But he was quickly disposed of by the other 8 turtles. Shirelle faced the Source Turtles and was unpleasantly surprised to discover that Khary had freed 1987 Shredder and Krang, and 2003 Splinter. Khary was against Shirelle destroying the multiverse. The original Raphael threw Shirelle off a roof, but the villain had upgraded his armor as well, and he now could make himself bigger, just like Krang, thanks to a molecular amplification chip. Krang and Shirelle fought like giants in a very brief battle that Shirelle won. During the battle between Shirelle and the original Turtles, he accidentally hit the Technodrome, unknowingly freeing Bebop and Rocksteady, who Khary had imprisoned. After seeing their masters struggle against all the turtles, they ran to help him, accidentally unplugging the lethal laser that was about to kill him. Seizing the opportunity, Shirelle held the original turtles in his hands and started trying to crush them. This triggered the erasure of the entire multiverse, affecting everyone. After realizing that killing the turtles would also be his end, he hesitated for a bit, and then doubled down on destroying it all if it meant the end of the turtles. When everything seemed lost, the 1987 turtles threw some exploding throwing stars to save the Source Turtles. This left Shredder unbalanced, and that was when Bebop and Rocksteady plugged the laser back in, which unintentionally destroyed Shirelle. With the Turtleverse safe, all the 1987 characters returned to the Technodrome, back to their universe.
It's ninja time! Turtle power!
Khary, Splinter, and the 2003 Turtles returned to their universe as well, leaving the original turtles behind in one of their most iconic poses. The film then broke the fourth wall, taking us back to Mirage Studios in the 80s. After finishing the drawing of the source turtles jumping into action, Kevin and Peter took a break from working on their first issue, completely unaware of the multiverse they had just created. For reasons I'll explain later, there is a director's cut of the film that includes deleted segments. Depending on where you watch the movie, you may have already seen these. Here's a list of all the edits not present in the original American DVD release. A short segment was cut where both Donatellos use an underground sonar device to locate the Technodrome. A very brief interaction between Shredder and Shirelle, in which the Utrum demanded to see the transdimensional portal device. A much-needed extended scene explained how Khary found the Technodrome, as she had been monitoring her father's location. It was also in that scene that Khary claimed the Technodrome as the Foot Clan's property. Another segment showed Krang and Shredder complaining about the changes in the Technodrome, and finally realizing they were under new management. An edited scene showed Shirelle inspecting the Technodrome computer, who now addressed him by all his aliases. He would then ask the computer about the concept of alternate dimensions. This scene is pretty much the same, but with missing seconds. There's another important segment that was edited out, where the 2003 Raphael complained that their counterparts were clowns, and was immediately scolded by Splinter, who asked them not to embarrass their sensei. This would later have a callback in the scene with the 1987 version of Splinter. April and Casey had a bit more screen time, with an extended fight sequence against the Foot and the mutants, right before the Turtles returned to the 2003 universe. A segment was cut in which the Turtles blamed each other's Shredders for the mess they found themselves in. The 1987 Turtles refer to theirs as decaf, because it wouldn't keep you up at night. There was a short edit in the Prime Universe scene where the 2003 Leonardo explained the problem to the Source Turtles. There was an interaction cut between Krang, Shredder, Bebop, and Rocksteady, where the two villains hoped that their henchmen would be as useless to Shirelle as they were to them. The last bit that was cut from the American version was Khary's plea to Shirelle to stop the destruction of the multiverse. For a moment, the villain stopped, and then doubled down on destroying everything. While the results were the same, it added extra drama to the original climax. A very popular scene in this movie is the one where all the different universes are shown. The pictures shown were simply a demonstration of the many worlds out there with turtles, but they weren't meant to be taken as canon. Many of the images belong to the same universe, and most of them were from the canon Mirage stories. Some of the distinct universes that can be inferred from this sequence are the Mirage, 2003, the Same as It Never Was timeline, Archie, the Anime Turtles, the Winter Souls trilogy, the Super Turtles, the live-action movies, the Dreamwave universe, the 2007 movie, and more guest-era universes like the one from Time and Time Again, and many more. When going through the list of possible worlds, Peter even suggested adding the Coming Out of Their Shells universe. Another curiosity was that at a certain point, it wasn't Bebop and Rocksteady that would have saved the day. All the turtles would have failed to stop Shirelle, and a turtle spirit would have intervened to save the day. As you can imagine, Bebop and Rocksteady saving the Turtleverse was less of a deus ex machina, and it also prevented going in the same direction that the Hallmark project was supposed to go. In that cancelled project, the Turtles would have merged their spirits to save the day, an ending that Peter wasn't fond of. Another curiosity was the mutation of Hun. The idea to turn him into an evil turtle came from the writers, but Peter suggested making him look like Slash, something that would have been explored had the show continued. At the end of the movie, Splinter made a remark that Shirelle was probably not dead. This was a strategic decision, as at the time of writing, there was still the possibility of returning for another season to finally resolve the War of the Shredders plot. The final shot with Kevin and Peter was filmed with actors, but the duo provided their own voices. Peter even supplied some period-accurate materials for the shot. The movie was officially released in international markets like New Zealand, Australia, and Canada between July 11th and 29th, 2009. and it premiered in the United States on July 23, 2009, at San Diego Comic-Con as part of the 25th anniversary celebration. A one-day theatrical release was planned between NCM Fathom and 4Kids TV for October 22nd. Tickets went on sale, but by the end of September, an agreement couldn't be made, and the release got cancelled. The film's director cut was split into 3 episodes and broadcast weekly from October 31st, finally debuting as a movie on November 21st. The air date was set so it would air during the fall sweeps period on the CW4Kids Saturday morning block. The film was preceded by a top 10 episode countdown marathon. The unedited episodes were rerun on CW4Kids from November 28th to December 12th. Then, 4Kids uploaded the unedited version of the movie to their website for free starting on November 16th. Turtles Forever started as a 4Kids production, but became Nickelodeon's first TMNT movie right before it hit the finish line. In August 2010, and coinciding with the DVD release, the American edit of the movie aired on Nickelodeon, and then again for Thanksgiving on Nicktoons. They would eventually air the film in special TMNT marathons. In 2011, the DVD was released internationally with a director's cut, a decision that baffled the American audience, who now had to acquire a different region DVD to get the unedited version. So, if you've been paying attention, this means that there are technically 3 different versions of this movie. One is the American edit that was roughly 73 minutes long. This was the version that aired and was trimmed to accommodate a 90-minute time slot with commercials. Then there's the director's cut, which was roughly 80 minutes long. This version was available online for streaming on the 4Kids site, as well as the one released internationally. If you don't know which version you have, check the runtime on the back cover of the DVD. It may differ when you play it, depending on the DVD's region. PAL and NTSC formats will result in different runtimes when playing on a computer. The last version of the film is, of course, the one that was split into 3 episodes of 22 to 26 minutes each. As far as I know, this version was never officially released, but it's the same as the director's cut. The director's cut could have been released, even on Blu-ray, had it not been for Nickelodeon's acquisition of the franchise. The company didn't want to spend more money on the previous iteration because they were putting all their efforts into developing their own. Turtles Forever gathered strong ratings by Saturday morning standards. It scored roughly 1.5 Nielsen ratings, with a 6% audience share in kids programming, nearly topping the CW4Kids lineup. It was one of 4Kids' highest-rated broadcasts of the year, helping the block tie its best performance in 2009's fall sweep. While the movie sought to bring together 3 generations of fans, it drew its fair share of detractors. The way the Fred Wolf Turtles were represented in the film was a bit too goofy, in a way that didn't feel true to how they were originally portrayed, often making jokes and pranks and being obsessed with eating pizza. To many, this felt too much like a parody of the original cartoon. Having said that, they had redeeming characteristics as well that were taken from the in-universe logic of the 1987 cartoon. For example, Donnie being an absolute genius who can make anything work, Bebop and Rocksteady being essential in accidentally destroying the Shredder, and the Turtles in general not being afraid in the face of danger. While the parody side of it is present, I think a point can be made that the movie is making fun of all 3 iterations of the franchise. It only looks to be parodying the Fred Wolf Turtles in particular because most of the action takes place in the 2003 universe. When all 8 Turtles ended up in the Prime universe, it became clear that the 2003 Raphael wasn't as cool as he perceived himself to be. In the same way, the Source Shredder got disposed of rather easily by the other Turtles, a clear nod to the character only lasting 1 issue. But this jarring contrast between the sets of Turtles only occurs when they cross into another universe. Each set works well in its respective universe. Overall, it's the 1987 version of the Turtles and villains that moved the plot and saved the day, all thanks to the logic from the Fred Wolf cartoon. Therefore, while I understand the complaint that the film makes fun of the original cartoon, that wasn't the original intention. They were trying to write a love letter to all three iterations of the Turtles. Another controversial decision was not having the original cast reprise their roles, and the use of sound-alike songs when they couldn't access the originals. But given the budget restrictions, this was all they could offer at the time. Because of its release timing, the movie served as a conclusion to the 2003 series, and paired with its introduction in the comics a few months earlier, it introduced the Turtleverse to the lore, making it possible to revisit past iterations of the franchise. And of course, because of its timing, it also marked the end of 25 years of the franchise's existence as an independent property. In 2024, coinciding with the 40th anniversary of the Turtles, IDW published a special that covered different versions of the franchise. Lloyd Goldfine, Khary Randolph, and Emilio Lopez revisited the 2003 universe, confirming the return of Shirelle and that Hun is still a mutated turtle. But this is a story I'll cover soon. What are your thoughts on Turtles Forever? Does the whimsical depiction of the Fred Wolf universe affect your enjoyment of it? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the sewers.